Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. You remember last week, we did a lot of analysis. We, in fact, spent the whole program trying to make sense of the manifestos of the three candidates that we selected to analyze. That Peter Obi of Labour Party, Bola Tinubu of the APC, and Atiku Abubakar of the PDP. But tonight, what we are going to do is to put their ideas and their manifestos side by side and look at which of them you need to, as a voter, make your choice with, and look at who has the best ideas for your choice on the 25th of February 2023. So I'm being joined by the co-founder of Budget, Mr. Seun Onigbinde. Thank you so much indeed, and it's good to have you back on the program tonight.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's eaten up. We're just about 24 days away to the election.
Yeah,
let's dive into it. And so we're looking first and foremost about their philosophy.
Yeah.
What are these telling us? Side by side, we're seeing these three philosophies. What do you make of it?
So we start with the philosophy of Atiku Abubakar, and we said that it's pro-business. He wants to make sure that the private sector is a key driver, and I think it's focused on the small businesses, restructuring, and most especially expanding opportunities and growth. So a pro-business, a private sector guy. Even on health, on education, a lot of his policies and commitment on that we need to let private sector be the engine of growth. When you're taking on Bola Tinubu, there's a huge push on private sector, but he also wants to spend big. He believes the government needs to spend big, that orthodoxy, the economic orthodoxy around the fact that we need to raise interest rate to fight inflation, and all of those things have to be heavily questioned. So big on spending, a lot of interest in rapid and scalable industry, investment in infrastructure, and also focus on agriculture. So he's trying to also build these agricultural clusters across his geopolitical. So the same thing when you see Mr. Peter Obi also mentioned agro clusters across region. And like you will say, it's big on reducing cost of governance. Dedicated a whole full page into cost of governance, streamlining and saying even that we need to streamline personnel cost. There's no reason why someone in another agency and another personnel agency are earning a disparate size of amount of money. And also talk about rebuilding Nigeria's production engine. And I think when you look at the three of them, it's like people say it's the economy stupid. This is what they center their conversations upon as people. But if you dive deeper, to the economy, which is the next page, you will say that...
So before we go there, so I was going to say, now, so it's distinct in their individual personalities and the perspectives that they have in, I mean, Bola Tinubu, for example, who's been the governor of Lagos, they're talking about industrialization, cluster. Peter Obi had made it clear that he wants from production that Nigerians need to produce what we consume. But Atiku has made it clear, in 2019 he said it, that he wants privatization and the private sector to take a lead in all of that, perhaps lead us into the issue of economy. So we know for sure, side by side, Nigerians can know which and how these candidates stand, isn't it?
Yeah, because...
Does it affect the economy, that philosophy?
It affects, because if you look at Bola Tinubu, is big on continuing what the current president is doing. Spend big on infrastructure, make sure that you put a whole lot of people behind it as an engine of growth. And I don't know where the revenue would come from for that kind of outlay that is promising.
The spending that he's pushing
That is pushing forward, because, I mean, we know that there is a bill in the National Assembly to securitize around 23 trillion naira. So we don't know, and that's also fallout of the huge spending that the President Muhammadu Buhari's government has done.
He has a very huge experience in the finance sector, right?
Yeah, and I think
maybe he has some ideas that we do not know about.
Maybe we do not know, and also has an experience in raising taxes. I mean, growing Nigeria was one of the biggest points in Lagos. So maybe something is going to happen in the non-oil taxes that we don't know yet. Maybe there's some levers that grossly inefficient that we have to do. But you see that he's big on youth unemployment. He wants to drive the economy at 10% growth. And Nigeria has never grown above 7%. So if
that's going to be some miracle.
That's going to be a miracle. And it means that an annual growth of 10% is a very few frontier economies that have been able to drive
What is IMF projecting? What is Nigeria projecting?
We're projecting around 3 to 4%.
So Tinubu says he wants to do 10%.
10%. And I think, and you know that we had a slump. So it's like you're coming from a slump and you're going up. There's still an opportunity for you to grow big. But now he wants to do 10% on an annual basis.
He's not climbing. He wants us to fly.
He wants us to fly. That is a whole lot. And the same thing, if you look at Atiku and interrogate her deeply, he wants to make sure that our GDP per capita gets it to $5,000 by 2030, which means you want to double the quality of mental standard of living within a period of 7 years. That is a whole lot of work.
He also wants us to fly.
Yeah, he wants us to fly.
Instead of GDP growth.
Yeah, because it means that you're going to, what the implication of what is said there means that we have to grow around 13% annually if we're going to be able to.
Are they realistic though?
It's people talk about people who govern in prose, they campaign in poetry. There's a lot of poetry in all of these things, a lot of buzzwords. And it's the same thing that I want to ask about, even the fact that, and some possibilities like 2.5% of for FDI, which comes to somewhere around 10 billion, you should be able to do that annually. But Peter Obi also made a whole lot of promise too. He wants to shift off from consumption to production as an economy. And he also wants to diversify the economy for engine growth. There was a big push on export. And I think if one was listening to him over time, it's big on the fact that we consume a lot. We need to be an economy, an export engine, and we need to be a production economy. Same thing Bola Tinubu said. Same thing Atiku also said. Yeah. But I think Peter Obi had a strong emphasis on that.
In the last 2 days, Bola Tinubu has been hammering on he told them in Abia State, he told them in Anambra State that he's going to make them a hub for industrialization and trade and commerce. So he said that in those two southeastern states, perhaps, if you go to Abia State where you have Aba as a major trade hub in the country, if you tell them that kind of message, it will resonate, isn't it? And Anambra State, you have you have a lot of companies like Innosing and the rest. When you tell them that you want to make an industrial hub, it does sound good, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the pathway for Nigeria's growth. We cannot leap because services is a chunk of our GDP. It's not providing the kind of jobs in terms of numbers that we want. Industrialization and scalable agriculture is what we have to do in some sort of way and put a mix around that area. And I think for that emphasis on industrialization, and there's also been an outlet in resolving youth unemployment, it's something that cuts across, but it does have different approaches when it comes to it.
The political economics of it is my problem. That all of these promises are very good. I could make promises to you, Sheil, that I will buy you this, I will get you that, but do I have the wherewithal to be able to do it? That's a big question. Make Nigerians happy, but do they have the wherewithal? Do we have what it takes to be able to change these things around within this frame of time that they have given?
There's a fiscal space you have to engage, and that takes us to the next page. Because when you look at the monetary and fiscal policy they've put forward, we're a country where FG revenue is around 5 trillion naira in the last few years, maybe sometimes even a little bit less than that. We're spending around 14 trillion naira, the federal government alone. The question is, there's a huge gap that has been taken from borrowing from domestic and international market, and the rest the CBN has been supporting in that regard. There is not a lot of room for the federal government to be able to apply on these things. That's why there has to be a big conversation about where does the private sector come in play on all of this. Because the more you keep getting government to do things, one, government is very inefficient in allocation of capital. And the second challenge you will have is also that if you're putting a lot of money into space that are not asset-backed, it will lead to inflation and deterioration of your policy.
So, how deep are we in terms of monetary policy and our circumstance as a nation when it comes about monetary policy and fiscal policy also put side by side? How are we doing? So now, because I'm asking this question so Nigerians can understand just how deep we need to move out and the promises that these gentlemen are making to Nigerians. If you have to drag someone out of the pit, you need to know how deep that pit is. How deep are we in that pit?
For the monetary policy, if CBN is targeting inflation, and is doing that by continuous increases in the benchmark rate.
And inflation is in double digits.
And inflation is in double digits, not just in double digits, in its 20s.
It's the 20s.
So it's a problem that if you want to say, I need some fiscal space, because we all got here by CBN doing more than necessary. At several intervention programs. So the CBN even became more important than the Ministry of Finance, something that is not supposed to happen even in this fiscal space. So you have CBN
spend the most money in agriculture at some point.
That's right. So you have people CBN doing both monetary and fiscal policy side by side. So it's going to be we're going to see that contention about you want to reduce inflation, and at the same time you also feel that government needs to re-engineer the economy.
The question of ways and means and how we're going to find our means away from the trouble that question, that big question mark has left us, is another one. Anybody who becomes president out of the 18 guys who are running for president is going to have that burden to be able to deal with, isn't it?
Because, yeah, it's going to be a big burden. Because don't forget that when we securitize now, then definitely we have to pay interest on those loans. We have to pay back on those loans. That we are suffocating already. Around 80% used to service debt.
What are these guys saying? Compared, I mean, in comparative analysis.
I think he wants to create an infrastructure debt fund. So I think there's a bit of sense in ring-fencing fund for infrastructure. If you're going to use funding coming from the budget to fund infrastructure, it would never be enough. Something the Buhari government has done with the Sovereign Wealth Investment Fund.
And it didn't work.
It works to some extent. So you have things that you have like the Second Niger Bridge, the Gossiban Express Road. Those things add a bit of acceleration because you were able to put some funding aside, or maybe you call it MSPV if that's appropriate.
Don't use that one. People have gotten in trouble. So.
But Tinubu talks about progressive tax regime. There's a huge political economy conversation here around the review of the fiscal allocation formula, which means you want to give more money to states. How feasible is that, even if as the federal government itself is sweating? And also reduction in the cost of governance. It says it wants to put a cap on government expenditure, which is something I found also interesting. Obi talks about reducing costs of governance, and he made a big point, only one around the Oron Sire report, that he wants to put down on the table.
As a big gateway to get out of that mess.
Yeah, because we have close to over 700 government agencies. You know, and so many duplication and so many streamlining that needs to be done.
The three of them have very lofty ideas, isn't it?
Yeah, they have lofty ideas, but I think you would see a bit of change in terms of Tinubu still wants to be a bit of restructuring inside. Atiku also has some point on restructuring, but if a Tinubu wins, for example, there will be a bit of contention in between CBN trying to target inflation, bring in inflation, and also he wants to also spend big and also engineer us to growth.
That's two tough things to do at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
But security now.
On security, and if we start from, Atiku talks about restructuring and decentralizing policing, and also hiring over 1 million people, personnel into police force. As we discussed last week, that's contentious because you want to decentralize, you also want to expand the federal policing system. And I don't think he's talking here about hiring policing for the decentralized system, because that would be out of his remit. But you have Tinubu saying also anti-terrorist battalions. I find that like there are so many battalions that have been created specifically for the Navy, for the military, for the Army. There are like special squads for fighting terrorism. So why do you want to build a bit of duplication in that regard? Improvement of salaries, talked about welfare. For B, his security talked about, I like his security because he also connected to the justice system. Because it's a view that military also just can't stand as alone. The civilian element of it is also critical to also harmonize that together. And also it committed clearly. I mean, I don't think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu committed directly to state policing, you know, in his manifesto. He didn't make a very, you know, very verbatim commitment to say, I would do state policing. But
I thought these two guys, Peter Obi and Bola Tinubu, being former governors who have distinct ideas on the tiers of policing in the country. Peter Obi mentioned it. He spoke about improvement of salaries. He spoke about also money to be spent and wondering where these monies will come from. That's a big deal. Employing people, it costs overhead again. Yeah.
Yes, it's a lot. And like I said, a lot of people campaign, but by the time you come down to the numbers, you see it's going to be difficult. This is where most of the big spending will be. And there's a huge chunk of, everyone is talking about increasing our oil refining. Atiku thinks we need to improve our refining capacity to 2 million. We're around 1 million by the time we factor in Dangote, Bua, and what we have currently and in terms of what it could do. And there's also a huge push on private sector driving the infrastructure. We talked about the infrastructure fund being warehoused. For Bola Tinubu, there's a huge point of infrastructure has to be the engine of growth. And I think it's also continued the APC philosophy, and something close to, you know, what we spoke about last week, that the party itself has a philosophy. The candidate has a philosophy. There's a marriage.
So there's a link.
And I think if you're looking at linking Bola Tinubu with Buhari's position, is that infrastructure is a key driver. We need to keep spending. Obi also talks about world-class infrastructure. I'm struggling that there was no commitment in terms of numbers on his side. But he talks about power systems, road, rail, air transportation. But I still struggle at the fact that he was a bit vague on what exactly.
But does he really connect with the philosophy of his Party, Labour Party, to a large extent, it's supposed to be labor-related. I mean, workers-oriented. Does this manifesto reflect all of that?
I didn't say that, because you also want to say, and I think that's where a lot of people find conflict, to say, you know, how labor unions can be big on securing jobs, and sometimes it could be highly inefficient, take-home payment, and also even if you want
affordability of commodities and all of that.
If you want to streamline things, I feel on some certain level of cost of governance is great. But by the time push comes to shove, you have to start sacking or retrenching people, there will be challenges.
Let's race through these sectors. Health, what did you find out between the three of them?
Health is good, but I like the fact that Bola Tinubu talks about mandatory health insurance program to cover at least 40%. But the timeline is what I'm worried about, 2 years. We're around 6%. To take you to 40% is a whole lot of work. Obi talks about putting 15% of the national budget into health. But somewhere less than 7%. So if you want to do 15%, it's a huge push. And you also have competing government priorities. Atiku, as usual, talked about transition to universal health, but not a lot of commitment. But he's also big on the fact that the private sector can unlock opportunities for health. But I don't know. Health should be a right, so the private sector handling it.
And the UN benchmark is about 15%, isn't it? For education and health. So, I mean, is that reflective here too?
For health, for education, nobody made a commitment directly on budgetary allocation.
Are you disappointed?
I am in some sort of way. And I think, you know, the challenge is that there's a huge push on the fact that there was no road now, there is a road here now. But and that's why I drive through state capitals now, you see beautiful nose, bright green, and you ask that, is that an economic activity happening in here? But for someone like Obi on education, he spoke about the fact that we need to build, rejig the digital skills. It was really big on the fact that young people should have digital skills. And I think it was because of the demographic that he's also engaging with. Tinubu had a huge point on the fact that student loans and also the out-of-school children. And Atiku talked about the fact that the tertiary education system needs to be better regulated. All of them have great ideas, and I don't think anybody has anything start. Obi was great on Siemens. I'm still shocked that Bola Tinubu didn't make a direct categorical reference to this point, because they're just committing a whole lot of money, and there's a huge promise and opportunity there. Obi talks about the solar revolution. Atiku wants to get us the same kind of party that we have with Siemens. And finally, and I think that on small businesses, it's still out there in hanging. But at the end of the day, if you look at all the arguments, this is not the sole decision for people going to the polls.
No, but I mean, fantastic job you've done at the Civic Hub and budget. Thank you so much, Sean, for coming. And look, I mean, Nigerians have been presented with these ideas, which of course we will make these available on channelstv.com and of course on your platform, so that people can be able to see and make a decision for themselves. These promises can no longer be in poetry. It has to be practical.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. That's our show for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. There's something big in the offing. Don't miss tomorrow's program, because there will be a big announcement right here on Channels Television at 7 p.m. I'll see you then. I'm sure Akimbaloe. God bless Nigeria.